The Meridian Crossing was the kind of station that collected misfits the way old ships collected barnacles, slowly, inevitably, and without much ceremony. It hung at the edge of the Vayathi expanse like a rusted ornament, home to 47 species and at least twice as many grievances. Traders docked here because it was convenient. Mercenaries docked here because it was profitable. And Mara Ellison docked here because her freighter needed a new ignition coil, and this was the only station within 6 light hours that carried the right gauge. She was not looking for trouble. Trouble, as it so often did, found her anyway. Mara was small by human standards, 5 feet 4, lean, with the kind of sun-weathered skin that came from growing up under a star that didn't particularly care whether you lived or died. She had short dark hair she kept tucked behind her ears, a scar along her jaw from a bush cat encounter when she was 9, and eyes the color of storm clouds over the Kell Mountains back home on Kepler 442b. Kepler 442b. The planet the Galactic Survey Commission had officially classified as Category 7 hostile biosphere, colloquially known among spacers as a death world. To Mara, it was just home. She was carrying a crate of power cells through Corridor 9 when Kale Veyron stepped into her path. Kale was Virati, a species that stood roughly 8 feet tall, built like architectural columns, with 4 upper limbs and a pair of iridescent neck frills that fanned wide when they were feeling dominant. Which, in Kale's case, was approximately always. He was the kind of being who had learned very early that size solved most problems, and had never been sufficiently motivated to learn anything else. He looked down at Mara the way a mountain might look at a pebble, if mountains had contempt. "Soft skin," he said. His translator chip rendered his words in flat, clipped standard. "You are in my corridor." Mara stopped. Set her crate down. Looked up at him without particular alarm. "I wasn't aware corridors had owners," she said. The neck frills flared, a slow, theatrical bloom of iridescent purple. Around them, a few other travelers paused and quietly backed away. A Sulian merchant physically pressed itself against the wall. A Karathi dockworker suddenly became very interested in a panel of the ceiling. "Everything on this station belongs to the Virati Trade Syndicate," Kale said. "Everything. Including access rights. Including you, little softskin, until you pay the toll." Mara tilted her head slightly. The motion was calm. Almost curious. "I'm going to ask you to step aside," she said. Her voice was level. Conversational. The tone someone might use when discussing the weather or the price of engine coolant. "I've got somewhere to be, and I'm not paying any toll." Kale stared at her. Then he laughed, a booming, resonant sound that the Virati used to signal amusement and, simultaneously, the irrelevance of whatever they were laughing at. His syndicate men, 2 of them flanking him slightly behind, chittered in echo. "A softskin," he said again, as if the word explained everything. "A Deathworld softskin, I'm told. I've heard the stories." He leaned down slightly, bringing his enormous face closer to hers. His breath smelled of sulfur compounds. "I've also heard that softskins exaggerate. That your so-called Deathworld is nothing but a mudball you've romanticized to frighten the impressionable." Mara did not step back. She looked at him. Really looked at him, the way she had learned to look at things on Kepler 442b, assessing, quiet, measuring threat with the practiced dispassion of someone who had been cataloging danger since before she could read. "You seem like someone who's never had to learn a lesson the hard way," she said. "So I'll be generous. I'll warn you once." Kale's frills spread wider. "Warn me." "Yes." She picked up her crate again, balancing it against her hip. "Step aside. Because if you don't, this is going to go badly for you, and I'd genuinely prefer to just get my ignition coil and leave." The laugh this time was louder. The 2 syndicate men joined in fully. Somewhere behind Mara, she heard the quiet shuffle of other bystanders relocating to even greater distances. "Badly," Kale repeated, savoring the word. "For me." He straightened to his full height. all 8 feet of him. The frills caught the corridor lighting and shimmered. Do you know what variety are, Softskin? Do you know what we can do? I know exactly what you can do, Mara said. I've read the xenobiology files. Then you know. You can exert approximately 2,400 newtons of grip force with each upper limb. Your skeletal structure is primarily silicate lattice, which makes you resistant to blunt trauma. Your skin is thick enough to stop most non-accelerated projectiles. She paused. Your pain receptors, however, are concentrated in your neck frills, which you keep spreading wide open like you're trying to gift wrap them. And your eyes are sensitive to UV band light in a way ours simply aren't. Silence. Not the silence of a crowd waiting for something to happen. The silence of a crowd that suddenly realized something already had. Kale stared at her. I grew up, Mara continued, her voice still unhurried, on a planet where the grass has evolved razor edges to slice open grazing animals and drink the blood. Where the primary apex predator can smell adrenaline from 2 kilometers away and uses that to hunt scared prey, which is why we learned not to be scared. Where the weather patterns include electromagnetic storms that will fry any navigation system built for normal atmospheric conditions, so we learned to navigate by stars and landmass memory before we turned 12. She shifted the crate to her other hip. I have been bitten, stung, charged at, and nearly drowned. I have killed things with my bare hands that would make your syndicate boys faint. I did not warn you because I'm frightened of you. She met his eyes, a flat, calm, storm gray. I warned you because you haven't done anything to me yet, and I was raised to give living things one chance. Kale's frills had stopped moving. The 2 men behind him had gone very still. Mara waited exactly 3 seconds. Then she stepped forward. What happened next was fast, the way things on Kepler 442b had trained her to move, because on a Deathworld you did not hesitate and you did not waste motion. She dropped the crate, stepped inside Kale's reach before he could process the movement, and drove the hardened edge of her palm directly into the base of his left frill, the cluster of nerve tissue she had mentioned, helpfully, 30 seconds ago. The sound Kale made was not dignified. He folded. Not collapsed, Varadi were too structurally solid to simply collapse, but he folded, hunching inward, his forearms curling toward his body in involuntary protective response, the frills slamming shut. He hit one knee on the corridor floor with a boom that rattled the wall panels. The 2 syndicate men moved. Mara had already moved first. She didn't fight them so much as redirect them, using their own momentum, their own mass, the geometry of the corridor. One went into the wall. One went into the other. The whole thing lasted perhaps 8 seconds. Then it was quiet. Kale was still on one knee, breathing in shallow, controlled bursts, frills clamped flat against his neck. His 2 men were not unconscious, but they were very carefully not moving. Mara picked up her crate. She looked down at Kale, the same way she might look at a storm on the horizon back home. Noting it. Assessing it. Filing it away. I warned you once, she said simply. That's all you get. She walked past him down the corridor. Behind her, she heard nothing. No footsteps. No commands. No further laughter. When she reached the supply merchant at the end of Corridor 9, the Karathi dockworker who had been watching from a distance was already there, pretending to examine a rack of fuel adapters with tremendous focus. I heard, the Karathi said quietly, not looking at her, that Varadi are considered the most physically dominant species in this sector. Heard that too, Mara said, setting her crate on the counter. And you just. I warned him first. She found the ignition coil she needed and held it up to the light, checking the gauge. That part matters to me. The Karathi was quiet for a moment. Where are you from? It finally asked. Mara set the coil down and paid for it. Somewhere that taught me, she said, that the most dangerous thing in any room is usually the one that doesn't look like it. She picked up her purchase, nodded politely, and walked back toward her ship. In Corridor 9, Kale Veyron was still on one knee, frills flat, learning, for what his body suspected was the first time, what it felt like to be the smaller thing in the room. The lesson, unlike Mara, would stay with him a long time. Later, station logs would record only a minor altercation in Corridor 9. No serious injuries. No formal complaints filed. The Verati Trade Syndicate quietly rerouted its operations to a different docking wing. And somewhere in the Vayathi expanse, a small human freighter jumped to FTL with a new ignition coil and a pilot who had already forgotten the whole thing, because on Kepler 442b, this sort of afternoon barely counted as noteworthy.